The smell of old wood and incense drifted through the church hall, the kind that sticks to your sweater for hours afterward. I stared at the ribs of the vaulted ceiling, tracing centuries of weathering in the beams. The walls hummed with barely restrained voices, the sound of my neighbors assembling to watch a spectacle they didn't entirely understand, but relished anyway. It was late spring Tokyo, already thick with humidity, and my underarms prickled with sweat as I sat under the glare of mismatched ceiling lights. The congregation came not for worship or celebration, but for me. That Sunday afternoon was dedicated to the annual community meeting, a tradition so ingrained in our neighborhood you'd expect it to be written somewhere in the Japanese Constitution. My father sat in the front row, stern and silent, beside Aunt Mizui, who wore a navy suit jacket despite the swelter. My classmates lingered at the back, feigning boredom while hunger for drama sparkled in their eyes. I was 17, and I only half knew what hit me. Pastor Sugihara had a voice like a bell, deep and precise, hammering who belonged and who didn't. He read from the sheet I'd handed in, my statement of ambition for the year. I'd written honestly. It was my last bona fide confession before retreating into bitterness. To become an architect and build. Sugihara paused, squinting as he adjusted his bifocals. High-rise towers that will make Tokyo proud. The way he said it, as if my words were written in a toddler's crayon scrawl, was a cue for laughter. A ripple ran through the benches. Do you understand? He turned to me, and I met his gaze, chin high, even as my fingers clenched my knees. What does it mean to take on such arrogance, building towers, showing off, as if our community needs more soaring vanity? He shook his head. Your father is a humble electrician. Your grades, average. You have never even built a birdhouse, boy. My cousin snorted loudly, and a few women covered their mouths to kill their giggles. Can you draw? Someone piped up. Another, maybe a plastic model house, yes? It was public shaming with a veneer of moral concern. Why dream beyond your station? Why trouble the harmony? Even the people who didn't outright mock me, their silence felt colder than derision. Adults avoided my eyes. My friends shifted, uneasy. My mother sat stone-faced, lips pressed white. Sugihara moved on, but damage was done, the room's mood sealed. Whatever hopes I'd harbored for encouragement or at least a polite nod died, buried under the growl of that afternoon's humiliation. By the time the meeting ended, the talk of scholarships and neighborhood duties washing over me like static, I felt hollowed out, my ambition shrunken to something pocket-sized. Something I could hide. The church hall faded behind me. I found solace where no one would follow. Decaying construction sites, city libraries, the rooftops of half-ruined buildings where I could see the Tokyo skyline framed by scaffolding. Home was tense silences and careful, cautious conversations. My father waited for me to apologize, to say I'd aim for something realistic. Government office, technical college, any path that bent to the weather of community approval. But I didn't apologize. Instead, I worked. In the dim corner of our tiny apartment, with noise from the train rattling the window panes, I sketched at the kitchen table. City blocks, intersections, the arch of bridges, mushrooming clusters of towers like crystalline forests. I wore out pencils, my fingers smudged black at bedtime. They called me selfish. At graduation, my uncle clapped my shoulder and asked if I'd solved this building obsession yet. I gave him a practiced smile and watched him drift back to his world. My first university application failed. No money, no support, not enough English or math for the top-tier places. I waited tables at a ramen shop, mop in hand late into the night, cursing the grease under my nails. But I kept sketching, swapping textbooks and library books, piecing together knowledge out of sheer bloody-minded defiance. I tried again, a small private design school, scraping by on loans and midnight jobs, cheeks hollowed out, pride my only armor. My family watched, always expecting my inevitable return to the sensible fold. In the studio, early on, a teacher called my models too ambitious. Again, that word, as if aspiration was a criminal act. I took the insult, sanded the models until they were smooth, and sought out every local design competition I could afford the entry fee for. Each failure was cataloged in a private ledger, but I never stopped. The more they doubted, the more I burned, not as a flame, but a coal, radiating heat over years. Eventually, two things happened. The first, a minor contest, a housing proposal judged by a panel who cared more about ideas than family trees or test scores. I poured everything in, losing sleep and appetite, walking the city at dawn to study how light fell across blank walls. I won. A tiny plaque, a feature in a design magazine, and, most importantly, a mentor. Suzuki-san had built half the schools in North Tokyo and saw in me a dangerous kind of stubbornness. He called it a compliment. The second, I learned to listen as well as proclaim. My uprising was never supposed to be at the expense of practicality. I just believed beauty wasn't a luxury. I started folding the quiet needs of real people into my plans, learning from Ma, the Japanese sense of negative space, how emptiness could organize and uplift. Years passed. My first real job at a respected firm came with indignities. Low pay, too much coffee fetching, sneers from old guard architects who sensed my non-traditional origins. I survived, sometimes just barely. Out of necessity, I learned to speak softly and let my work grow teeth. I married young, the girl who loved me not in spite of, but because of my restlessness. We rented a fourth-floor unit with no view but plenty of sky if you craned your neck. My family kept their distance. Pride tangled with worry. I called sometimes, my mother's voice brittle with questions. When would I stop chasing clouds and settle for something solid? Success, when it arrived, was subtle and slow. A string of public schools, a shopping plaza, a pocket park that drew evening laughter from exhausted salarymen and children. Then, unbelievably, an invitation to enter a citywide competition, a landmark building for Setagaya near the banks of the Tama River. Criteria to combine modern Tokyo's shimmering promise with the humility of its working neighborhoods. The old church now stood empty, rafters sheltering dust, the congregation scattered by age and the rising price of land. But in its shadow, the very community that had once ridiculed me needed revitalization, jobs, hope, a symbol. My proposal was brash, echoes of my first ambitions now honed by adversity. I submitted it and waited. The vote was close. I learned my design had won while sitting in a windowless office, hands shaking over a mercilessly formal email. Kawasaki-san, the city's lead planner, wrote, "Your vision honors the memory of place and opens possibility for the future. Congratulations. We look forward to working with you." I broke the news to my wife, speechless, her smile so wide it scared me. Then my mother, whose pause said everything. I heard faint crying before she composed herself. Returning wasn't triumphant, not at first. My neighborhood boarded up shops and rows of battered houses had expected nothing of me and now struggled to recognize me at all. The local newspaper ran a story, complete with an awkward photograph. Local Sun's vision to transform old district. At the old community hall, now renovated, air-conditioned, empty most days, a ceremony was planned. This was not, I told myself, for my ego. It was the way cities heal ancient wounds. The night before the unveiling, I barely slept. I lay in the guest room at my mother's house, listening to the groans of the floorboards, inhaling the sweet decay of tatami mats. My father's slippers padded across the hallway, his silhouette hesitant in the doorway before retreating. I rose before dawn. Outside, Tokyo was smeared with mist, neon flickering uncertainly in the morning haze. I drank bitter coffee, standing in the doorway, watching sparrows dive between telephone wires. At noon, the hall filled again, this time less crowded, less sure of itself. Faces were older, hair silver at the temples, but their skeptical posture hadn't changed. Aunt Mizue, suit replaced by a